How many of you are absolutely terrible at remembering people's names? You've tried word association, you've tried repeating it 3 times within a conversation after they introduce themselves, you've tried it all. But names just won't stick in your brain. One of my main roles in guest experience here at Way Church is to walk people from a first-time guest into a serving role, into discipleship, and eventually into a leadership role of some kind. From meeting you for the first time, to getting to know you, to finding a place for you to thrive within this community. But the first and one of the most important things at the beginning of all of that is this: I have to remember your name. Back in March, I remember there was a lady who had been coming to our church a handful of times. She'd even shadowed in one of our serving roles, and I came up to her one Sunday. I introduced myself to her, and I asked her what her name was. And when she told me, I was so embarrassed. I hadn't connected the name to the person. Long before a person as a child can articulate who they are, their name is already doing that work for them in the world. Psychologists have noted that a person's name activates unique neurological responses. It cuts through noise in a way that no other word does. This is sometimes called the cocktail party effect. In a crowded room of sound, your name spoken quietly will reach you. Your brain has assigned your name a unique priority because your name is you in the most immediate experiential sense. So when someone mocks your name, mispronounces it habitually or carelessly, or just flat out refuses to use it, preferring a nickname that you dislike, it registers as an attack on you. Not because the name is precious in and of itself, but because the name is you in social reality. A person's name has an incredible sense of identity attached to it. If you want to know who someone is, you have to start with their name. Forgetting someone's name makes them feel insignificant, makes them ask, if you can't even remember my name, do you really know anything about me? Your name distinguishes you from any other. It represents you in your absence. It carries your history, your reputation, your relationships. Your name is not simply an arbitrary sound. Your name and your personhood are inseparable. So it shouldn't surprise us that when God reveals himself to Moses in the burning bush in Exodus chapter 3 and commissions him to bring Israel out from under the oppressive hand of the Egyptians, that Moses asked this question: what is your name? Moses says this in chapter 3, verse 13, "If I come to the people of Israel and I say to them, the God of your fathers has sent me to you, and they ask me, what is his name? What shall I say to them?" Because up to this point in human history, God has not introduced himself by name. He has simply been the God of our fathers, or the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, the God of Jacob. In other words, the God that your dad worshipped. But he's not revealed himself by name until now. God responds to Moses by saying this: I am who I am. Say this to the people of Israel: I am has sent me to you. One of the ways that we can translate this Hebrew phrase, I am who I am, is whatever I am, I will be. Meaning, whatever God is like, he's that way consistently, unshifting, stable, always. I am simply is. The name doesn't have a meaning like yours or mine does. The name is pure self-existence because the name and the being are identical. But God still hasn't really told Moses his name yet, has he? He simply stated that everything that he is the fullness of that. But the fullness of what? Let's hold on to that thought, because Moses is going to ask this question a second time. And this time God is going to answer it. But a lot has to happen before we get to that second question. After this encounter with God, Moses goes somewhat reluctantly to Egypt to confront Pharaoh. Let my people go, he says. 10 times he goes before Pharaoh. 10 times Moses says no. So God sends plagues. Water turns into blood, frogs, locusts, a darkness you can feel. And finally, the one that breaks the back of Egypt, death. passing over every household not sheltered by the blood of the Lamb on the doorpost. So Pharaoh finally lets them go. God splits the Red Sea in half, and they pass through on dry ground. And when they get to the wilderness, God gives Moses the law on top of Mount Sinai, while the people down below are actively breaking every single law on those tablets. When Moses comes down from the mountain, God tells Moses that he will send an angel ahead of them, but he will not go with him himself. Because if he does, his holiness will consume them on the road. And the people mourn. God's presence is the very thing that sets this people apart. Without it, they are nothing. So here we are. Moses asks again the same question that he asked 30 chapters ago. This is Exodus 33, verse 12. Moses said to the Lord, "See, you say to me, bring up this people, but you've not let me know whom you will send with me. Yet you have said, I know you by name, and you have also found favor in my sight. Now, therefore, if I have found favor in your sight, please show me your ways. Why? That I may know you, in order to find favor in your sight. Consider, too, that this nation is your people." And he said, "My presence will go with you, and I will give you rest." This really wasn't the answer that Moses was looking for, and so he says again, "If your presence will not go with me, do not bring us up out of here. We don't want to go if you are not coming with us. For how shall it be known that I have found favor in your sight, I and your people? Is it not in your going with us, so that we are distinct, I and your people, from every other nation on the face of the earth?" And the Lord said to Moses, "This very thing that you have spoken, I will do. For you have found favor in my sight, and I know you by name." Notice he repeats himself there. Moses, again, not the answer he's looking for, begs God. Verse 18, "Please show me your glory." In other words, tell me who you are. And God says this, "I will make all of my goodness pass before you, and I will proclaim before you," catch this, "my name, the Lord, Yahweh." The climax of the story happens here in the very next chapter, Exodus 34. The Lord descends in the cloud. This is verse 5. "He stood with Moses there and proclaimed the name of the Lord." The Lord passed before him and proclaimed, the Lord, Yahweh, Yahweh, a God merciful and gracious, slow to anger, abounding in steadfast love and faithfulness. This is his name. I am merciful. I am gracious. I am slow to anger. I am steadfast love. I am faithfulness. The very essence of these attributes, I am who I am, Yahweh. His name, his glory, and his character are one, unchanging forever. This passage is directly quoted or strongly echoed over 20 times in the Old Testament alone, making it the most cited self-disclosure of God anywhere in Scripture. And its language and its theology appear almost a dozen more times in the New Testament. Now, you may be thinking, all right, so God told Moses his name and a bunch of things about himself, and that exchange is talked about several times in the rest of Scripture. What's your point? Let me ask you this. What does the fact that God has a name and has expressed it to us tell us about God? It tells us that he wants to be known. Guys, I have an example for you. If you were to meet a girl and she wouldn't even tell you her name, what are the chances that you're going to get to know her very well? Not great. How about if you got her first name and you go on a date, on this conversation that you have over ice cream, she doesn't tell you a single thing about herself? How easy is it going to be to get to know her? Again, probably pretty difficult. Now, what would you do if a girl told you her name, it was beautiful, And in conversation with her, she went on to tell you very specific details about her dreams, her aspirations, about her family, her hopes, her fears. What does that tell you about that girl? First, it tells you should probably pay attention. You should probably be taking some notes too. But it tells you that she wants you to know her. She wants to be known. God is the same. God could have responded to Moses' question of, what is your name, with, I am omnipotent, I'm all-powerful. He could have followed it with, I'm omniscient, I'm all-knowing. And finally, he could have said, I am omnipresent, I am everywhere all at once. And these things are all true and valid descriptions for God. But these words don't get to the heart of who God is. If that was his introduction to Moses, you wouldn't assume that he probably wants to talk to you, would you? But I assure you that he does. Every other religion in the world is the story of humanity trying to find God. The Bible is the story of God making himself findable. And the first move he made was to tell us his name. The name that David would sing all over the Psalms. The name the prophets used, pleading with the people to, like in Joel, return to the Lord your God, for he is gracious and merciful, slow to anger, abounding in steadfast love, and he relents over disaster. Who knows whether he will now turn and relent and leave a blessing behind him? That's Joel chapter 2. The name that the prophet Jonah even tried to use against God. We studied this just recently, the book of Jonah. You get to the end of the book, and Jonah has begrudgingly preached a message of repentance to the people of Nineveh. It works. And what does Jonah say? "O Lord, is not this what I said when I was yet in my country? That is why I made haste to flee to Tarshish. For I knew that what? You are who you say you are. You are a gracious God, and merciful, and slow to anger, and abounding in steadfast love, and relenting from disaster. Therefore, please take my life, O Lord, for it is better for me to die than to live." In other words, I know who you are, and I'm not happy about it. This is the name that Nehemiah uses when the people confess their sin. Nehemiah, he tells the story of their ancestors here in the wilderness that we're talking about in the book of Exodus. In chapter 9, he talks about this. They and our fathers acted presumptuously. They stiffened their neck and did not obey your commands. They refused to obey and were not mindful of the wonders that you performed among them. But they stiffened their neck, and they appointed a leader to return to Egypt in slavery. But you, God, are a God ready to forgive, gracious and merciful, slow to anger, and abounding in steadfast love, and did not forsake them. He did not forsake them in the wilderness here in Exodus. That's the part I don't want to rush past, because forsaking them is exactly what it looked like was about to happen. Let's go back to the mountain. After everything fell apart at the base of that mountain with Moses, God's answer was not a lecture. God's answer was a moving truck. He told Moses his name in incredible fashion, and then he said, "Build me a place in the middle of your camp. I am moving in. I want to be among you, not just near you, not watching from a distance, among you, because I want to be known." Picture it. There's 1 million people living in tents in the wilderness, and right in the middle of the camp, God says, pitch mine there too. Not on a hill at a safe distance, right in the middle of the noise and the mess and the chaos. That is how badly he wanted to be near them. And for centuries, that's where he lived. First in the tabernacle, that tent that they made for him right in the middle of the camp, they called that the tabernacle. Then, once they had built the temple, that's where he resided, among his people. But there's still a curtain There's still a distance between where the people could be and the Holy of Holies. There was still a distance. You could get close, but not all the way. And it stayed that way for 1,000 years. And then something remarkable happened. God said, I'm not close enough. The name showed up in person. When the Apostle John describes the incarnation, which is God becoming flesh, Jesus, when John describes that in his gospel, he reaches back and he grabs that same word, the 10th word, tabernacle, and he says this in John chapter 1, and the Word became flesh and dwelt, or tabernacled, among us. And we have seen his glory, glory as of the only Son from the Father, full of grace and truth. Moses had begged, please show me your glory. God says in Jesus, John says, we have now seen God's glory walking around. But even with had a limit. A body can only be in one place. If you were in Galilee, you couldn't be with him in Jerusalem. So then the night before he dies, Jesus says the strangest thing. He tells them that he's going to leave. And that it's better, and actually to their advantage, that he does. Better. How is losing God in the flesh better? He explains this, John chapter 16. If I don't go, the Helper won't come to you. But if I go, I'll send him to you. He wasn't backing away. He was about to get closer than a body ever could because of the death and the resurrection of Jesus, you can now be a place in which God resides. God moves inside. The Spirit of God takes up residence, tabernacles inside everyone who belongs to Jesus. The entire Bible is the story of God closing the distance. From the garden where he walked with Adam, to the tabernacle in the wilderness where he dwelt among Israel, to the coming of Jesus where he became one of us, to Pentecost where he took up residence inside of us, to the consummation at the end of time when Jesus returns and every barrier between God and his creation dissolves completely. God has been on a singular mission from the beginning. He wants to be known. He wants a people. And he will not stop pursuing until he has made his home in them. But notice, he never does this with a crowd. He closes the distance one name at a time. So let's go back to the mountain again for a second. Did you notice God's response to Moses when he comes to him again asking for his name? God says, I know your name. And you also have found favor in my sight. Moses pleads, show me your ways. And God says, my presence will go with you, and I will give you rest. And then a second time, after Moses expresses concern for his present situation, what does God say? You have found favor in my sight, and I know you by name. It's almost like God is trying to tell him something, yeah? Both at the burning bush and here by the mountain, Moses is fighting an immense amount of fear. So much fear. Who am I that I should go, he says. What if they ask me, what is his name? What if they don't believe me? I can't speak clearly. Oh Lord, please send someone else. The man is riddled with fear, and God says, I will be with you. I know your name. Sometimes God asks us to do hard things. Have any of you ever had God ask you to do a hard thing? A couple of weeks ago, I asked my daughter to do a hard thing. I asked her to give up her pacifier. Our goal has been for a while now that by 3 years old, she'd be potty trained and no longer addicted to her pacifier. Because that's what she is. She's addicted to it. It's not really doing what it used to. When she was a baby, she'd cry and the pacifier would pacify. Now it's just something that's precious to her, something she feels like she needs, but frankly, she's outgrown it. I didn't ask her to give it up in a belittling way. I didn't ask her to do the hard thing, and for her, this really was a hard thing. I didn't ask her to do that and then walk away and make her deal with it alone. I sat in her room in the glider as she cried, begging for her pacifier until she fell asleep. I did the same thing the next day during nap time, and again that night as she kicked and she flailed and she cried, gently comforting her and reminding her that she was going to be okay, until she would calm down for about 30 seconds and then be immediately asleep. I stayed with her through the hard thing. The God of all creation knows your name. He knows when you are afraid. He knows the pit you feel trapped inside. He knows. He knows. That's where this entire rescue of the nation of Israel started. Because before the burning bush, before Moses, the very first thing that Exodus tells us about God and these people is this. During those days, the king of Egypt died, and the people of Israel groaned because of their slavery, and they cried out for help. Their cry for rescue from slavery came up to God. And God heard their groaning, and God remembered his covenant with Abraham, with Isaac, and Jacob. God saw the people of Israel, and look what it says, and God knew. He knew their struggle. He heard their cries for rescue. Why? Because he was already with them. And let me tell you something here that I don't want you to miss. He knows your name too, because he is with you. God calls you his child. And if he's calling you child, then he's telling you what kind of a father that he is. For some of you, Father's Day is a hard day. And even the word father can stir in you some difficult emotions. Maybe it brings up an empty chair, or a hard man, or maybe a good man that you miss. Hear this today. The name that God gave Moses is what kind of a father he is. Merciful, gracious, slow to anger, abounding in steadfast love and faithfulness. That's the Father who knows your name. That's the Father who wants to be known by his children, and he's given us his word to show us how relentlessly he pursues his creation. So here's the question that this name asks you today. Not, do you know about God? Not, have you been to church? The question that the name asks you today is this. Have you let him close the distance? Because he's been moving towards you your entire life. The only move left is yours. If you let him in, you will be transformed. You will never be the same. The question is, will you let him do that for you?